Hello, gunfighters, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting and gun-related stuff the right way with God at the center. Gonna try something a little bit different. You guys are probably familiar if you've listened for any length of time. The Better Know a Cartridge episodes. They're kind of short episodes on a pretty particular topic, so I think I'm gonna forego the lengthy bio. Try to abbreviate it. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Pretty succinct. You want to support? Go to Patreon. Should be a link in the show notes. Boom. Let's get into the day's topic. What are we going to talk about today? How about some funky guns? Guns that diverge from the norm. A little bit different. If you knew me in real life, you quickly would realize that I'm a little bit different. In fact, my niece, who is adorable, the other day we're in the backyard and I was foraging acorns, and I've taught my dog, Alexander Hamilton, a Rhodesian Ridgeback, to forage as well, so he was foraging acorns. He'll crack them open and chew on them. I forget exactly how the conversation goes. She said something like, "You're eating those, that's not normal food." And I said something to the effect of, "Well, I'm eating them," to which she replied, "Yeah, but you're not normal." And, out of the mouth of babes, right? She got me there. I am not normal, never pretend to be. We are called to be set apart, a peculiar people. Anyway, a funny story I thought you guys might enjoy before we get into the gun stuff. Also, it struck me that is normal food. Like throughout human history, foraging nuts and acorns and things like that for food, that's normal food. Going to the grocery store and getting bleached white, hydrogenated, long chemical names strung together preservatives in Mylar bags, that's not normal food. Acorns are normal food, but I get what she's saying. To most of society, sadly, that stuff is normal. A bag of Fritos would be normal, what people would consider normal, but foraging acorns would be considered abnormal. Anyway, just an interesting thought. With that, a couple of caveats. These are going to be, because this is Gunfighter Life, this is going to be strange, divergent from the normal, perhaps esoteric firearms that are still relevant today. And by relevant, I mean a legit number of people hunt with them, carry them, defend their life or their family with them. Like, they're still relevant. Example that would not qualify: the Nagant revolver. It's super cool and interesting the way that it works, the way the whole cylinder cams forward and creates a gas seal. It's very unique, but I don't think anybody's CCWing a Nagant revolver. Maybe somebody out there will prove me wrong, and they are. But that's not what I would consider a practical gun for today. Likewise, not old like that, but the Taurus Curve. It's a gun that literally is bent. But I don't think many people are actually carrying that gun. I could be wrong. There may be one or two people, but I'm not going to count that as a practical gun. You could disagree if you want, but I'm trying to keep this into practical guns. If you like the old, archaic kind of weird guns, no affiliation with them at all, but Forgotten Weapons is fascinating, and I like to listen to that stuff too. But for this podcast, gunfighting guns and modern hunting guns is what we're talking about. And to give credit where credit is due, the spark to this was a Patreon gave me an old gun magazine from 2014. And I was flipping through it, and I saw a gun in there, and I thought, that's a weird gun. And then that got my brain spinning. So some of the guns I'm going to talk to you about are going to come out of this magazine, Gun Buyer's Guide from 2014. With that, let's get into our first gun. The Savage Impulse. It's a straight pull. It looks like a bolt-action rifle. It, I guess, technically is bolt-action, but you don't rotate the bolt. It's not a rotating bolt-action. If you consider what's vastly common, 90-degree bolt throw or 60-degree or some version thereof bolt throw, 2 locking lugs, 3 locking lugs, where the bolt lifts up, you pull back, you shove it forward, chain bring around, and you lock the bolt back down again. Savage Impulse doesn't work like that. You pull the bolt straight back, it kind of pivots. You pull it straight back and push it forward, and it chambers around and is ready to fire. Now that's nothing new. Bolt action straight pulls have been around for a long time, but that's the first. But it's a modern one, and although there's another one that's still used heavily, especially in Europe, that's a legit modern hunting rifle. I think the Savage Impulse takes it. It's innovative. It uses ball bearings, and it's not dirt cheap, but it's affordable to, I would think, a common middle class person, which the next one I'm going to talk about is not. But the Savage Impulse comes in a lot of different versions. Sadly, and nothing against this if you want to hunt this way, but you look at the versions of it, and it's kind of geared towards this new version of the long range hunting with computers and all that stuff. I would love to see them come out with like a brush carbine version of this, where it's short, handy, iron sights, because that would lend itself to that quick cycling of the straight pull. Anyway, the Savage Impulse definitely is weird, different, and pretty cool. So hats off to Savage for making something like that. The next one, if that's like the Ford F-150 of straight pulls, this next one is going to be like the Cadillac Escalade of straight pulls. And that's going to be the Blaser R8. The Blaser R8 is a phenomenal rifle, gorgeous. You can change out calibers, change out barrels, exquisitely made. It is a straight pull rifle. And if you look at the Blaser R8, it's striking in that it hits me as being a very practical rifle, especially for the kind of hunting that I like to do. Also, I don't know how they walk this line of being space age looking and also very classic, like gentleman European looking. And they still come, most of the models that I see, with iron sights. Can we please bring that trend back? Anyway, the Blaser R8, really cool how they operate, how they work, how they have that barrel exchange system, and just beautiful rifles. And very different. Okay, the next one, let's go from the rifle world to the handgun world and modern carry and fighting handguns. The Beretta PX4 Storm. There are a ton of polymer 9mm on the market, so why is this one different? Well, because the vast majority of those plain vanilla polymer striker-fired handguns use a Browning tilting barrel system. But oh no, not the Beretta PX4 Storm. It has a rotating bolt system, which has been done in the past, but to my knowledge is the only common and well-proven and battle-used rotating barrel handgun on the market. These are not as popular as, say, a Glock 19, but they are by no means obscure. They are used quite a bit. I do believe they are a NATO tested and used sidearm. They are very good. They are very well made. I think there is merit. I think there is an advantage to that system over the Browning tilting barrel system. It's the Browning tilting barrel, although it's the most popular because I think it's cheap to make, is not my favorite. Just like the default in bolt action rifles is a push feed because it's cheaper to make, but I really prefer controlled round feed. I really prefer a couple of other systems to the Browning tilting barrel system. I know it's cheap, I know it's easy to make, I know it's simple, but I think there are some real inherent advantages, and I like seeing that Beretta still makes and people still use this gun. To give you an idea, on most semi-automatic handguns, when you pull the slide back, that barrel kind of drops down and tilts. I should say the barrel and the slide kind of move back together for a very small fraction of time, letting that pressure drop from the cartridge because it drops really quickly, and then it unlocks and that whole barrel kind of swings down and tilts on a more common system. On the Beretta system, if you pull that back, you'll start to see after a while that barrel will start to turn like spiral. It's a completely different and I think really good system. The Beretta PX4 Storm kind of proves that out, right? It's not one of the most popular guns, but it hangs in there and it's well proven and it's a really cool gun and definitely different. The next one, and that's the one that sparked this episode, the Boberg. I don't know if bullpups are obscure enough to be on this list on their own, but a bullpup handgun certainly is, if you want to consider it. I don't know if it's the same. I don't know if you would actually consider it a bullpup handgun, but the principles are similar. Now, you're likely familiar with modern semi-automatic handguns, and picture again that slide moving back. Bear with me, I know this is audio, but the slide moves back the magazine pushes with a spring a round up, and when the slide comes forward, if you have disassembled your slide, you look in the middle, there's a part that hangs down in the middle that grabs that round and shoves it up into the chamber. Well, the Boberg, if you picture a handgun mingled with one of those vending machines like you see when you're leaving the grocery store, where the hand comes down and grabs the little toy, if you actually can articulate it to grab it, and it lifts that little, I don't know, stuffed bunny rabbit up or whatever the thing is and drops it down. Picture a contraption like that when you fire the gun, this claw comes and grabs a round out of the back of the magazine. It doesn't come out the front of the magazine like almost every other design I'm aware of. It grabs it out of the back of the magazine and then articulates it in such a way as to go into the chamber. Now, the advantage of this is that you can have a longer barrel and a shorter handgun. If you look at, like, let's say a real standard gun, the Glock 19, if you look at how long that gun is versus how long the barrel is, you have a lot of space that's not barrel. You have a lot less of that space in the Boberg. So if you're not familiar with that gun, you want to kind of look it up, and you're not really tracking what I'm saying because it's a very different system. Maybe go check one out and see how they work. But that Boberg, they've been around a while. Again, it's in this 2014 handgun magazine, and I just checked, they're still available. So they must not be that bad. And the fact that they're still being produced tells me that people probably are using them, and probably somebody out there is carrying them. So I think they're barely on the list as a practical gun, but I think as long as they are reliable, it does give a practical advantage, maybe to a CCW carrier, especially in the world of modern handgun ballistics, because hollow points are velocity based, right? If you take a hollow point and point it down and drop it on the table, it's not going to expand. It needs a certain velocity to expand. And when you start chopping, length off a barrel, you lose quite a bit of velocity in handguns. And you might get to a point where that hollow point no longer expands. This system lets you get a longer barrel and a shorter overall handgun. So if that's important to you, I think this really does have practical advantage. So I think it should be on this list. The next one, it lives in this kind of quasi-handgun, quasi-PDW submachine gun world. An enigma wrapped in a riddle, this gun. The Chris Vector. Now I see this gun and I think, no thanks, I'll pass. But a lot of people see this gun and are like, oh, it's cool. And apparently it's in some video games. I don't know. It's been a long time since Mario Brothers. But apparently it's in some video games, which a lot of people think is cool. But the Chris Vector, you can say whatever you want about it, but it's very different, both in looks and function. Very, let's be polite and say, unique here. It's very unique. And they've been around a while. I've been years since I've seen my first one in person, I think. And they're still around. And people do still buy them, and I would surmise by that use them as like a PDW, a truck gun. Now, I'm not telling you should do that, but I think they can be on this gun list as still a modern practical gun. If you're not familiar with the gun, it has what they tout as a counter recoil system. So if you're listening to this, you probably do know when you fire a gun, generally the recoil goes in the path of least resistance, since most of your body mass is down, and if you're right-handed to the right of that gun, then that gun is going to recoil up and to the left, up and to the left. It's going to look for the path of least resistance. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and wherever it can release that energy with the least resistance, that's where it's going to go, right? That's why your bullet goes out of the barrel instead of back into your face, because that's the path of least resistance. Well, if you're holding a gun, handgun, rifle, and you're right-handed in general, that's going to be up and to the left. That's why their gun recoils that way. Well, this has a counter recoil system, or at least what they say is a counter recoil system, where when you shoot, there's a mass in the gun that moves down. And that, in theory, will keep that gun on target, allowing faster follow-up shots. Now, in the full auto guys, I think this probably would have merit. In a semi-auto guys, in a pistol caliber, and that heavy a gun, I'm not really sure. But the Chris Vector, it appeals to a certain subset of people. Perhaps it's so esoteric that even I don't understand it. Definitely possible. But you talk about different, the Kriss Vector is different. Unlike the Nagant revolver, I've got a unique revolver here for you that I think is still very relevant and practical and definitely strange. Schiappa Rhino. The Schiappa Rhino. It's definitely different. How is it different? On pretty much every other revolver that I'm aware of, there may be another one, you have the cylinder, and then on the top, wherever the top of the cylinder rotates, that's where the barrel is. You line up the sights, put the sight on the top of the barrel. Probably why that exists that way. Simple, easy way to do it. Well, the Schiappa Rhino, you have the cylinder, picture the barrel on the bottom of the cylinder and your sights on the top with a lot of times a ventilated rib in between. Very unconventional looking, very different. Also, I should mention it has kind of a different cocking system as well, where you cock the hammer and then it goes back forward, but it's cocked on single action. At least the one that I messed with, I believe that's the way it was. Very unconventional looking, unconventional design, but here's where it's on this list. It's practical. One of the things we just talked about, and I didn't plan this, but the gun is going to recoil in the path of least resistance. Up. Generally, because the most of your body mass and strength and muscle behind the gun is going to be down from the axis of the gun. Well, this lowers that axis. It's still going to rise, but it shouldn't rise nearly as much because it's putting it more in the center line with your hands. You'll hear this touted a lot of times in the semi-automatic handgun world as bore axis, a high or low bore axis. And a low bore axis is desired. Well, this gives you a super low bore axis. I believe lower than you could have on a semi-auto. Because you can only lower a semi-auto in any design I'm aware of so far because that slide reciprocates and it has to go north higher than your hand. Well, not so on the Schiappa Rhino. So if you want that, and it's a real practical advantage, I think, and a well-made revolver. Sometimes Schiappa is known for making some cheap stuff, but they also make some really high-end stuff. Go look at their lever-action rifles. Anyway, the Schiappa Rhino, very different, I think very practical. And I was thinking about this, why is it not more popular? And I think because I like revolvers. I'm just going to start by saying that. I often carry a revolver, like as my manual labor EDC, my ultralight running EDC, a small, light handy 38 special and or 357 Magnum J-frame. Right? It's easy to carry. But I think a lot of people carry revolvers because they like that classic design. They see them as being simpler. They're simpler for the end user to operate, but take one apart and you'll quickly realize they are not more simple in the working mechanism inside them. I don't think anybody that's familiar or ask any gunsmith and they tell you the same. Completely disassemble even a common double single action revolver versus a Glock. And you'll soon realize the complexity. But a lot of people still carry revolvers, I think, because they like the classic design. They want to carry it in a leather holster. They want a classic but still functional gun. For an average CCW carrier, a good 357 Magnum 38 Special, medium size, medium frame revolver is not a bad choice. You some real inherent advantages, which I've talked about on whole episodes on revolvers. There are some advantages. And a lot of people that do that, I think, they gravitate towards the classic look and lines and feel and familiarity of the revolver. Well, you don't get that with the Schiappa Rhino. You kind of get space age looking, very modern and totally different looking than most other revolvers. So I think that's maybe why they're not more popular. But they're a good handgun and there's a real practical advantage there. So if you want to carry a revolver and you want something different, they've been around long enough now. I think they're a very proven and solid design. The Schiappa Rhino, very different, practical gun. Kind of the epitome of the episode today. Oh, and this one's going to make one of the patrons, I think, oh so happy. I think it belongs on this list. The Steyr Scout Rifle. Now, scout rifles are kind of different than the norm. They have their own little niche following. People in the scout rifle community, that's like their main jam. Like they really are into these things. But for the rest of the gun community, they kind of see them as this, again, esoteric, very different kind of small segment. And inside that small segment, there's a strange practical rifle, and that is the Steyr scout rifle. You think of the Steyr as kind of this classic hunting rifle design by Jeff Cooper, but when you look at the Steyr, it looks like a space-age rifle. It looks like something a sniper in Starship Troopers would use. It's polymer, it's fluted, it's very unique. And it has some, it doesn't just look unique, right? Because there's guns I'm leaving off this list that look different, but they pretty much work the same way. The Steyr is a little bit different in the way that it works too. It has some fairly unique features for a modern gun. It has detachable box magazines, no surprise there, but you can carry an extra magazine in the stock. Pretty unique and practical. I'd like to see that in a lot more hunting rifles. That would be great. A lot of places you can't go to and from or, be on a road, they call it road hunting, with a loaded rifle. Well, you could have, because let's face it, we all forget stuff, you could have a extra magazine in the stock. If you forgot the one in your pocket that's supposed to be in your pocket, and you were walking on that road for a couple of miles and you got deep into the woods, you'd have the one in the stock. Or you could have two different kinds of ammo on tap, your bear load and your deer load. Really practical and kind of unique. You carry an extra magazine in the stock of a bolt action rifle. That's pretty cool. Also, has a unique feature in that you can drop, you can kind of, I don't know if it's a button or a lever or something, but you drop the magazine down so that it doesn't feed out of the magazine, so you can single load cartridges from the top. If you've ever shot, from the prone or sighting in a rifle, you'll know how handy that can be. It's kind of annoying if you can't do that on a rifle, but this lets you do that and still have the magazine that you could then engage and cycle out of the magazine. That's a really cool feature. Quintessential to the scout rifle, you can mount a forward-mounted optic. You might think of it like a pistol scope. It's a little bit different. You could mount a pistol scope on here too, but well forward, so you can have that wider field of view, and the scout rifle community will tout it as all these other advantages, but mostly lets you shoot with some good peripheral vision, which is very practical, again, if you're on some kind of dynamic, let's call it a tactical arena, or if you're in some kind of dense cover where a leopard or a bear might be trying to eat you, or is wounded and might jump out at different angles at any time. That peripheral vision, that's a plus. It's practical. It also has an integrated bipod that folds up into the fore end. Now, any of these features on their own probably wouldn't be enough to make this gun go on the list, but the fact that they're all on this one gun, I think it should be on this list. The next firearm on this list, I think, will settle right down in this group and make itself at home. The FN PS90 or P90, the actual full auto version of this. If you look at this gun, it is radically different. It doesn't really look like any other gun. And this gun came out in 1990. That's a while ago now. It was radical then. It's still radical looking. Really nothing else looks like this gun. If you look at it, it's a bullpup, which on its own is not unique enough, I don't think, to merit this. But it has a top-feeding 50-round magazine that spins the rounds. They don't load in the same orientation as the barrel as do almost every other magazine that I'm aware of. They load sideways and then get twisted and then fed into the gun, and it actually works. Like, these guns are known for being reliable. Talk about practical. I think they're probably, in my opinion, the best PDW ever made personal defense weapon in their full auto guys. And if you say no to that, if I offered you a full auto version of these as a PDW, what else would you take in place of it? Like a full auto PS90 and 5.7, 50 round top fed full auto, and a light handy package. They're a light gun. Very cool, very strange, and very practical. They would make a great PDW, great for vehicle operations, stuff like that. It's a fantastic choice and fantastic practical gun that's just a very far departure from the norm. Alright, as we wind down here, I've got two more for you. This next one, the controversy, I think one. I don't think that I would consider it practical, but the fact is, and the numbers on the number of these things sold, lots of people would consider it a practical gun for carjacking, for a CCW, for whatever. And that is the Taurus Judge. There's so many of them made. They're still a popular seller. What makes them unique? They work like many other double single action revolvers, but they fire the 410 shotgun shell. They weren't the first ones to do it, but they were the first handgun to really make it a popular thing, right? They weren't just a flash in the pan. They've been around a long time, and a lot of people have them. And there's also the Smith & Wesson Governor, which has the advantage of, I think, being made by Smith & Wesson and their quality control. Also one more round and lets you shoot 45 ACP in addition to 45 long Colt and 410. But to give credit, Taurus is the one that brought these really and made them kind of a mainstay option. There's a lot of different models of the Taurus Judge. They work, right? They're probably work as good as any other Taurus revolver does. Take that however you want. But a lot of people think these are great anti-carjacking guns, great practical guns. Whether I consider them practical or not is not the point. I think there's enough people that do consider them practical, they should be on the list. I knew a man once that did a lot of backcountry hunting in Idaho, and he kept one of these for shooting grouse. Like when you get real close to a grouse, and he's got his, center fire rifle for hunting elk, and he's got this in case he comes across a grouse and wants to eat it. So there's a practical use for it. It's unique. It'll let you fire the 410 shotgun shell or the 45 long Colt, or in the case of the Smith & Wesson Governor, also the 45 ACP. You can get different loads for them. Snake shot, you might consider that a practical use, taking out snakes. Bird shot. And you get the multi-projectile, I don't know if I'd call it an advantage, or flexibility is probably a better word, of shooting buckshot or the disc shot. So it's different than most other revolvers in that regard. The flexibility of ammo. Anyway, the Taurus Judge, I think, should be on the list. I think enough people consider it a practical choice to put it on the list. Again, not whether I consider it practical, but I think a lot of people would. And the last one, I don't think any controversy on how practical this one is. And it's not unique in the action, but it's unique in its pairing. The legendary, storied 760. I'm going to call that probably the most common, but also the 76, the 760, and the 7600 Remington. Just legendary in the deer woods. Legendary American hunting icon. Why is it different? Because it's a full-powered rifle round in a pump action, or I guess more proper nomenclature, slide action. It's a pump action shotgun in full-powered rifle rounds. 30-06. Probably the most common. 270, maybe the second most common. Full-power rifle rounds in a pump action. Quick, handy. Follow-up shots. Popular for oh so long, and I really hope they come back, because if you're not aware, Remington recently went through a bankruptcy. To my knowledge, they're not making this gun anymore, but they were made for such a long time, and they are so practical and such a great deer hunting gun. If you had to pick like top 10 deer hunting rifles of all time, American, I think it would be on the list, and I think it would deserve it. So very, very practical. Bolt actions you can work really fast, but I don't think you can work them as fast as a pump action. That legendary reliability and pump action shotgun, but in a full-powered rifle cartridge. I'm going to list off some of the chamberings it came in, and this is per Wikipedia. 30-06 300 Savage, 35 Remington, 270, 257, 244, 308, 222, 280 Remington, 223 Remington, 243 Winchester, and 6mm Remington. How sweet would it be to get one of those and have it reamed out to 280 Ackley improved? Although they're pump action, they have a reputation for being quite accurate, I think, and I think they deserve that reputation. Now, maybe not for today's standard of, I need to have a sub half-inch gun that's going to shoot 1,000 yards and kill Tyrannosaurus. But for practical, like woods carbine, spot and stalk hunting, what a great gun. Pump action, classic lines, points well, points quick. If you like the Remington 870 and the way that points and handles, the Remington 760 or 7600, or I think 76, maybe the original one. What a great gun. Different, practical, very cool, very utilitarian, different gun. And since I mentioned a story in the beginning of this, I should mention my uncle, because my uncle was one of the mentors I had, and I don't know if I would be as much in love with hunting as I am if it hadn't been for this man. A simple working man, a carpenter by trade. He had a few guns that he used and hunted with a lot. He loved hunting, and he went out of his way to go find a young Michael Melito and teach him about some of the ways of the forest. And I remember he would go out and buy me ammo for duck hunting and take me duck hunting and deer hunting. And one of my fondest memories, get that memory burn, you can still remember as much as you think you can remember, because memories are flawed, right? And I've played it back in my mind who knows how many times, and how different and divergent that is from the original actual memory. I remember being behind his house, whether it was land we were actually allowed to hunt or not, I don't know, but we hunted it. He had this Hawkins muzzle-loading rifle. Let me go hunting with it. I assume it was muzzle-loading season. Don't really know. And I shot a very nice buck with that muzzleloader as a very young man. And I don't know that anybody in my family had ever actually done that. I do believe it was a moving shot on that buck, and I remember seeing him running and just plow into a tree after he was shot. Just a vivid, amazing memory. That uncle, Uncle Will, again, a simple man with a few guns, but that really used them. The only centerfire rifle I'm aware that he had was a Remington 760. And I do believe, if memory serves correct, N.R.A. And it was a lot of that generation's go-to hunting gun. Why? Because it worked. A fantastic gun. Anyway, with that, let's start wrapping up this episode. If you like this episode and you want to support, the number one way is Patreon. If you want to get some merch, you want something tangible for your support, you can go to the gear shop at goodshepherdtraining.com. If you don't want to do either one of those, it really does help. It's not just a taciturn thing. If you want to scroll down and hit some stars, Spotify, iTunes, keep scrolling down. You should see a place to hit some stars. If you want to go a little bit above and beyond, write a review. But any of those ways to support the podcast would be appreciated. With that, the tactical tip of the day. Do not eat yellow snow. I'm just kidding. That's a bonus tactical tip. That's not the actual tactical tip of the day. But it's a good one. I think, sadly, tracking may be becoming a dying art for a lot of hunters. A lot of hunters today may hunt from a stand. A lot of this geared towards long range, super long range hunting. But tracking, I think, should still have a place, and a good hunter should know how to track. We are going to talk a little bit about yellow snow, but many other things. You probably know what a deer track looks like, even if you've never been hunting. But there are ways to tell. If you're looking for a buck, now I'm all about meat hunting, but a lot of places, even if you're meat hunting, you can only take a buck. I do believe sexual dimorphism is the proper vernacular for the difference between male and females of the same species. If you look at tracks of a deer, you can't really just go by size, but what can help you determine is the size of their front hooves, their cloven hooves, versus their rear cloven hooves. On a big mature buck, in general, the front hooves will be bigger, disproportionately bigger than the rear hooves. Also, you may notice that their front feet are wider than their back tracks. A doe, in general, will be more symmetrical. Their front and rear tracks will be aligned, and they'll generally be the same size, tracks front and rear. Now, I did go to naturetracking.com to confirm some of this, because some of this is stuff I think that I know, but I wanted to confirm it by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. A matter is established. So I wanted to make sure somebody else kind of confirmed this before I just touted it to you as knowing it's true. But I do believe those things are true. If you want more, you can go to naturetracking.com. That's where I looked this up. Seemed like a pretty good article. I wanted to confirm some of those things before I just spouted them out and them not be correct. A lot of times this stuff that we learn, that we think we know, well, let's just say the Bible says by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses a matter is established. Also, going back to the yellow snow, you think about the anatomy of a male and female deer. Care what popular culture says, male and females are different. Also different in the deer species. If you think about how a female deer urinates, it's going to go straight down pretty much between her hind legs. If you look at how a male buck is going to urinate, you'll see that urine a lot of times go in front of their hind legs. If you have a good enough track set and you're good enough at tracking to discern that and see where that urine goes in relation to their hind legs, it's a good indicator. Also, male and female deer smell very different. Now, if you've butchered enough deer, you'll know this and you'll be familiar with this. You can also use this in the field. Scent is one of the things we have. I do believe, if anatomy serves me correctly, human anatomy, it's one of the few senses, maybe the only sense, that's hardwired directly into our brain. Like it bypasses thought. A lot of times when I'm spot and stalk and still hunting, I can get into an area and go, there is mature male, let's just say even-toed ungulates in this area. Whether that's an elk or a mule deer or a whitetail deer, you can literally smell it. You can smell it. You get good enough at this, you can use all those things to deduce what kind of deer that is that you're tracking, what you're looking for, and many other skills. There's a lot that goes into tracking. And it's part of our heritage as adult human males. Tracking and killing beasts and eating them. Anyway, your tactical tips of the day on tracking. And hopefully what you've been waiting for, more than that, the tactical verse of the day. This word of God is coming from 2 Samuel 22. I can run against a troop. By my God, I can leap over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is proven. He is a shield to all who trust in him. For who is God except the Lord? And who is rock except our God? God is my strength and power, and he makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer, and sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze.